Disney series The Owl House, created by Dana Terrace, struck a lasting chord among animation fans. While initially intended to appeal to children, it ended up resonating strongly among teens and older. After lackluster reviews on Disney's television program, the show was cut short without a continuation under Disney+, Disney's own streaming service, where The Owl House excelled metrically. The show's fame turned into infamy as Disney's management team refused to breathe life into the show despite the dedicated viewer base. Glitch Productions swooped in to give Dana a new team to continue her creative endeavors elsewhere. While we're not talking about her new show, Knights of Guinevere, in this video we will be talking about the colorful cast of characters from The Owl House and rating each of them by how well the team utilized each character in the show.
Please, won't you join me for tea?
Adagast. Initially introduced as a mentor for Luz to fill the void of education Ida Clawthorne was uninterested in, Adagast was quickly pivoted into a Lovecraftian horror, hell-bent on causing Luz and Ida both as much pain as possible. Two-faced villains are nothing new, but Adagast is the most humanized we've seen of the tentacled abominations utilized by the horror genre. Adagast, as a character, while uninteresting on his own, quickly demonstrated to the audience the level that the show was operating on. Horror as a genre was generally utilized exclusively for adult entertainment, but the Owl House team managed to fit it into a safe-for-work mold while still maintaining the cosmic horror spirit. This fundamental change in the genre demonstrates significant skill and effort on behalf of the creators, as this iteration has not been thoroughly explored, meaning there's no safe framework to fall back on for guaranteed success. Adagast fit perfectly into a Monster of the Week archetype enemy while illustrating the unique dangers of the Boiling Isles, Bones Burrow's Fae-like social dynamics, and thrusting the main character and audience into the unknown very quickly. While I don't personally find villains like this to be very entertaining or satisfying, I want to acknowledge that this impact was greater than mere taste, because it was an expansion upon the horror genre, so I'm going to put Adagast into A tier.
The read of your last line was just a little...
I don't know what that means.
You'll figure it out.
Adrian, turning a negative theater kid stereotype into an insufferable devil among insufferable devils, but not for the reason you'd think, is something I wouldn't have on my bingo card. Most villains fit the mold: apathetic, self-serving, impatient. Meanwhile, Adrian has bold emotional displays, makes flair a priority, knowing when to hold his tongue despite his ability to ramble. While rude, he never really felt like a villain despite his brashness with the Hexside students and his staff. It looks as though his character was so wrapped up in his role as the Coven Head that he lost the plot, becoming Emperor Belos's disposable prop. It's very funny and ironic when a show uses a character's greatest strength as their weakness. For example, in Superman's case, he's so strong that everybody fears him and doesn't trust his help anymore. Despite Adrian's brief screen time, he left a lasting impression after only showing up for a day. S tier.
I should feel accomplished, but none of this feels right.
Alador introduces a quiet man whose concerns stay with oil and sludge more than blood and community. It is revealed that he was under contract by his wife Odalia as little more than a slave. Upon realizing his machines were used to conquer his world, he realized his children are more important than anything else and destroys the business empire he spent decades building in protest of his wife's poor life decisions. This character feels more like a therapy prompt from somebody who had a workaholic father, while undermining the idea that workaholics are formed when somebody's home life is so bad that they choose to work instead, because it's more peaceful. While I really like Alador and resonate with him more personally, I feel like his conflict was misplaced and lost a lot of depth over why I resonated with him in the first place, dropping him from a character I was excited to learn more about upon his introduction, down to an extra who plays little more than the powerful cameo, who helps the protagonist succeed when all hope is lost. I suppose that you could argue this character is more so the beginning of a conversation as opposed to the end means, and that's not to say his utility was useless, just that my personal enjoyment and letdown of the character was so severe that I don't like placing him higher than D tier.
Together there is no challenge that can hold us back. Ugh! Ow.
Amity. I don't know if it's just the people I associate with that warp my perspective on the character, or Amity truly is the fan favorite. I feel that Amity's emotional arcs hit most of her fanbase a little too close to home, creating a stunning parallel of issues that many people face in real life. While cartoons are not therapy, it does feel cathartic to watch Amity ditch the path her mother laid out for her and pursue her genuine hopes and dreams. While many characters in the Owl House present problems as they are, Amity is the hopeful beacon of progress, showing the audience what they could be. Watching Amity struggle to fulfill a better reality and all the hurdles she has to face, and how she overcame those hurdles, was truly marvelous to watch and honestly a little inspiring. I don't know if the writers intended for this character to instill a sense of awe in the audience through Amity, but it felt effortless. S tier. Barkus. I honestly don't feel as though this character is worth rating because he feels like a meme, but body swaps are a genuine magic in this series, and that's really fantastic for trans citizens of Bonesboro, which means that there is also transracial characters, but like in the real way. This makes Barkus's existence very interesting to me. As a character, Barkus feels like, if you like dogs, he's S tier. If you don't, he's F. I'm gonna split the difference and go with C. But because of cool magical implications, I'm gonna bump that up to B.
My, your hair is looking greasy.
Bat Queen. I honestly keep forgetting that the Bat Queen is a character that exists. She would serve nicely as a sort of monster of the week, but more so in a Sphinx's riddle vibe, which is fun, but makes the episode's moral she provokes feel too ham-fisted. B tier.
This is for the good of your souls. You'll thank me later.
Belos. Evil dictator wants genocide. Gee, haven't heard that one before. I think the most interesting part of Belos' character was how Luz went back in time and actually helped him out, making a sort of time loop shenanigan. The part that ruined the character for me was how he still commits to being an evil even after his prejudices are disproven. If it wasn't for his cursed talisman body giving him one of the most interesting shapes of villains I've ever seen, he would be the worst. Generic evil doer, generic evil for generic evil reasons without a single twist. Well, other than he pretends to be the Boiling Isles messiah figure, but that's an overplayed, generically evil thing to do now, so D tier. Bill. Basically all the same problems as Belos, but ugly. F tier.
I'm saying, please come back. We can rule New Hexide together.
Boscha. I kind of fell in love with Boscha as a character after watching a video about her by Jenny Cook. Check out her video on Boscha after this one if you're curious. I find her interesting more so because her character arc social implications. Boscha is 80s sitcom bully, but with some depth. The show doesn't go out of its way to explore Boscha's insecurities like it does with Willow, Gus, and the gang, but it sprinkles in hints here and there like a trauma breadcrumb trail, and as somebody who pieces together those crumbs for a sandwich for fun, I'm thrilled to bits that the team left this character here for me to scoop up the pieces of. I doubt they really meant for Boscha to be figured out and treated with depth, but making a convincing character requires some sort of rosebud and explanations for their actions, otherwise they're just a plot device. While Boscha has less history in the show's universe than Belos, she is significantly more complex with every single interaction. Boscha wants to stroke her ego and needs to bring others down to make herself feel superior and therefore feel good about herself. But she has to belittle people in interesting and unique ways, otherwise it would just look like a childish outburst. So she has to get creative and put on an act of aloofness to achieve her desired results. I think since admiration is so ephemeral, and Boscha is trying so hard to get something that is merely a figment of people's imagination, whilst Belos is trying genocide, I just find it's more interesting because there's no tangible outcome to Boscha's desires and insecurities. It's literally all in her head. Since every Boscha bit is completely secondary to the show's overarching plot, which I value more than B stories, I can't rate her as highly as I like, as she is one of my favorites, but I feel she deserves a strong A for how unique her arc is compared to the rest of the cast.
Were you trying to live out some witch fantasy? Did Did you hate living with me that much?
Kamala Nosida. Luz's mom is in a weird spot because she's simultaneously the sole reason the overall plot of the show kicked off, but outside of that, initiation has almost zero influence on the show until the very end. She feels more like a prop than a fully fleshed out character that does stuff with the granted screen time. Despite being a certified MILF, she's going in F tier.
You got so used to eating palisman, you can barely keep your human shape anymore.
Collector. An immortal force of nature with the power to reshape reality. Its weakness, being incredibly naive. I find it interesting how they exploit the Collector's naivety to overcome and defeat him, is also the same reason he became a problem in the first place. He also parallels perfectly with King's arc, where King has to be to the Collector what Luz was to King, and is therefore prepared to help through the reality melting sensation of his life feeling like a lie. It's not only the natural conclusion for King's life, since he is also somewhere in the Collector's shoes as a Titan, a near-immortal entity with reality-altering magic. Of course they would understand each other to an extent. It's basically if King were the antagonist. There's an incredible amount of nuance in the Collector's story to the point where it's exhausting to interpret all of it, especially with the mere 2 hours we got of the season 3. There's so much potential we could have explored if Disney turned the Owl House into a Plus exclusive. In addition to the amount of depth we get from the Collector being so subversive, with the flat-as-hell Bellows, that it actually makes me nostalgic for when villains didn't have nuance. Thanks to the Collector, I really enjoy Bellows as a generic villain upon rewatch, because they both highlight each other's narrative utility by how strongly they're contrasted. There's nothing inherently bad about a boring villain, because the villain is just a tool the author uses to tell the story they're actually interested in telling, such as the growth of Luz, King, and Ida. However, since the Collector contains at minimum 2 of his own character arcs, arguably 4, in such a small window of time, it really gives me the heads up to savor Bellows' heinous transformation each step along the way. I know I rated Bellows so low, but the Collector feels like such a perfect foil that despite Bellows feeling trashy, makes it feel correct. Like cheap beer and deep dish pizza, S tier.
This is impressively bad.
Darius. Personally, he's one of my favorite designs of all the characters in the Owl House, plus I also find it super cool that he uses abomination magic, a spell group almost entirely used to animate living servants, and instead uses it as an exoskeleton, going against the key feature of that magic class. It highlights that even though all the characters are bound to a particular magic type, it doesn't necessarily change the outcomes of people's lives, since the characters find such out-of-the-box ways to use their powers such that it offsets the restrictions of being bound to one magic type. It doesn't bridge specific things like beekeeping, like who needs the healing coven when your average D&D party just uses potions instead? It kind of spits in the face of the concept of wild witches and having a character that so blatantly goes against the portrayed status quo like Darius. It somewhat undermines everything Bellows is doing when Darius can accomplish the same things that the Construction Coven does, but with a completely different form of magic. Although we learn later on that Bellows doesn't actually care about wild magic, so much as he needs people to channel the 9 sigil types for his draining spell. It's also fitting how what is essentially Hunter's gay uncle is the one to reveal such fundamental societal flaws in the Overlord society, not unlike our own. For all those reasons, I love Darius as a walking talking contradiction with enough to satisfy the cast. However, the story utilizes him as little more than a trusted mole. He had so much potential, but instead he was just used as a plot device. Even though he's one of my favorites, I'm going to put him in the B tier.
It's been over 20 years, Witchlet. I can't chase you anymore.
I like how Dell's only contribution to the show was being a part of Ida's trauma, like the Owl Beast is her trauma. But Dell is also there, like sometimes And it's fun for an episode, but like, I feel as though Del only exists because Ida was originally written to have killed him, but Disney was like, no, that's a meanie no-no. So Dana was like, fine, she bit his arm off or something, and Disney was like, and then this is what we got, F tier. Unfortunately, Eberwolf is such a minor character that I didn't know her name until I looked it up to make this video. It feels rude to refer to her as Darius's dog, but like, that's the role she fulfills in the storyline. They just do the same things together, but doesn't have the same world implications that Darius does, or the same flair. It's just a cool design. And yeah, I guess Eberwolf is still a cute puffball who makes every scene with her in it better, so I can't exactly rate her poorly. I'll settle for C tier.
We've covered snow, so now it's on to smelling moss. Now the trick is, you really gotta get it up in there.
Ida the Owl Lady is my and many people's favorite character in the show, specifically because I resonate with her owl-beast dynamic akin to dissociative identity disorder, so that's my bias in favor of her beforehand. I think this character does an exceptional job at looking into the life of a stepmother. There's a number of reasons why an individual won't or can't have a kid of their own blood. Whether it just being spending too much time with the wrong crowd and regretting one's 20s and 30s, an abusive partner, or unable to physically give birth for a swath of reasons. Even though motherhood and the right to choose has been commandeered as political issues, there's still lots of couples who wish they could have children, and due to all the aforementioned reasons, or purely financial, cannot. It feels really bad to think that Ida's lens might be the closest someone will ever get to feeling that parent-child relationship. A lot of other shows attempt to portray that, but it's always so surface level or fictitious. Meanwhile, Ida, Luz, and King gets very raw and emotional. The story focuses on that. We can see clips of Ida doubting herself, wondering if she's holding Luz back, trying her best to mentor her, or wonder if she's failing them. Her sacrifice to protect Luz and King, wondering if she's actually making their future better. The show highlights Ida's sacrifice on many occasions, and a lot of media attempts to bridge the culture gap, but doesn't dive deep enough into those aspects of motherhood to actually bridge the generation's understanding. Some of my friends have kids, and some coworkers have asked me if I have any, or my little brother has been mistaken as my son sometimes, so when I watch Ida take responsibility over Luz, but try to maintain her independence, it's hard not to wonder how much of the writer's experiences went into this character, and if this was supposed to feel so real, if it was intended that way, or was supposed to be plot utility. S tier, moving on. Edric, chaotic gremlin for Funsies character, B tier. Amira, partner in crime for Funsies character, B tier. Flapjack, cute bird is red and has plot connotations because he's Caleb's familiar. It's not really touched upon in the show because it glances over Caleb so quickly as falling in love with some witch and that being the end of it, but the idea that Caleb studied witch magic and carved his own talisman showed he was further along into his magical journey than Belos, let it be known. Most of the time, I just watch shows passively because low brain power entertainment, but I like when there's an extra layer for me to dissect when I choose to engage with the show past what's happening on screen. A tier.
Mija, have you been lying to me?
Prometheus, the Fearbringer. Of all the terrifying things the show delivers, a toasted blob is fear incarnate's true form. Definitely a letdown. If Prometheus was at least like a giraffe skeleton, that would be hilarious given what we learn about giraffes later in the show. Plus, the uncanny valley of Adobe Animate's shape morphing could have been used to the animator's advantage instead of blob go burr. The lackluster design will take big points off, but the way the show utilized Grom to pull Amity and Luz closer together, despite separation being the fear, was poetic. I also find it hilarious that a weird subplot of the episode was that despite Luz being the one to face Prometheus, each of the other characters had to face their relevant fears before we even reached that point in the episode. The telling moment is also when Amity is so afraid of rejection that she straight up doesn't ask out Luz, like Amity already assumed no before the dance and went solo. Following that, Luz helped out Amity, and she was still too scared to ask for a dance or anything like that. After so many flashing red lights of Luz metaphorically saying yes, 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 she's still scared, and Grom just tiredly rips up the letter like, if you're too chicken to ask, you don't need this letter in the first place. It's not that Grom was evoking the fear of rejection, it's that Grom was straight up mocking Amity's cowardice, and that's why it didn't take on Luz's shape during the scene. It wasn't about Luz. Even after that dance, Amity was still so psyched out that she didn't do anything about her feelings for Luz, at least until the 29th episode. This has extra layers because Amity's cowardice is her biggest flaw when it comes to confronting her mom. She eventually gets the gall to face off against her, but again, Amity is terrified of being perceived as a coward. It's highlighted again when Amity allowed Luz to take over for her and fight Prometheus in the first place. Amity was scared, so she allowed Luz to be brave for her. This worked out in Luz's favor, because apparently that's what gets Amity's gears turning, but it's still hilarious how circumstantial Grom's powers are and how a lot of the community misinterpret it as rejection just because Luz said so. A tier.
I don't know. Humans like spreading their junk everywhere.
Gus. While Luz, Ida, Belos, Lilith, and Amity have arcs that tie their identity as people from the Boiling Isles directly into the central narrative, the show's climax couldn't have happened without them. Meanwhile, Gus, he's more of a supporting unit for the supporting units around him. Even Willow, who despite getting a lot of screen time, didn't really have much impact on the overarching plot. Willow was the heart of gold and the muscle when it was necessary, while Gus was the playful trickster who accompanied her that the writers used to dump corny jokes.
This was on my bucket list, after owning a real human bucket. I've got leaves in my pants. And I like it. First I'm growing out of my clothes. Now I'm shrinking? Dang, puberty, you're the craziest coaster of them all. Humans nail barbed wire to their kids' teeth? Maybe to make them magnetic.
This bled out my appreciation of Gus as a character with each bit that broke the show's tempo. I had a similar issue with King, where the specific jokes told by King and Gus felt so uninspired that it hurt my enjoyment of their screen time. I'm not saying Luz and Ida don't have any cringy jokes of their own, but at least they were given a lot more esoteric ones that would at least faze me a little.
I like editing anime clips to music and reading fantasy books with convoluted backstories.
Whoa, I thought I had a lot of weird stuff. But this is impressive.
Did I die? Am I in the bad place?
If I die here, my mom's gonna kill me! No! My weak nerd arms!
Humor is a matter of taste, but if Skara was the tertiary supporting character instead of Gus, the outcome of the show would be nearly identical. The only thing saving him from F tier is his unique perspective as a troublemaker prodigy, using his talents to cause chaos while the show waits for his kid brain to mature up to the same level as the rest of the cast. This results in a lot of wacky and fun scenarios while giving insight into the experience of the gifted kids who weren't given the same opportunities to socialize as their classmates. I really like how this experience is portrayed, but unfortunately it was done so through Gus, and that didn't really work out quite so well. C tier.
According to Wartlock, poison like this is made by healers and potion makers who simply want money.
Gwendolyn. Ida's mom is memorable in her episode and functions as an example for how intent alone is not enough. Gwendolyn ended up being a parallel for the conspiracy-minded, convinced that there's miracle cures that shake the status quo so much that they'll ignore common sense and morals in pursuit of them. What separates the average skeptic and Gwendolyn is, she actually cares about her daughter. She doesn't hide behind a false moral veil of superiority to High Road Luz and Ida or anyone else. This allows her to change when confronted with reality, while people we know who fit Gwendolyn's mold only stand behind their supposed loved ones as a shield from criticism. We even see Gwendolyn use Ida that way in the episode, acting as though Luz's criticism of her crackpot cure is criticism of her love for her child.
You really think I'd spend my life savings on a fake? Because I am a mother who will do anything for her daughter.
This episode doesn't actually accomplish anything narratively except showing the Clawthorns beginning to reconnect. The most interesting aspect of Gwendolyn's arc is when she realizes she was so consumed with looking for a cure for Ida's terminal illness that she realizes she completely neglected her other child, Lilith. The commitment to reforming that bond with her daughter is a touching resolution to an otherwise painful episode. Rather than feeling entitled to love, forgiveness, and adoration from one's offspring, as I see a lot in people around me, Gwendolyn is transformed from a villain-like stalker into a nurturing parent within the span of a single episode, and rather convincingly too. While she didn't serve the overall story as much as other characters, when the writers wanted to use her to tell a brand new story and give us a break from Dictator Bellows, we got to see a deeply personal and well-written story about a family in turmoil reforged. While unrealistic of most family dynamics, it's still a touching episode. Gwendolyn goes in B tier.
A good friend would respect her wishes, but a better friend would help no matter what!
Hootie. I don't have a single negative thing to say about Hootie. Usually a lot of shows try to make a generically cute Pikachu-esque mascot for their IP, which only works if it happens accidentally. Otherwise, it just makes the audience feel like a sucker for marketing, as seen with Magic the Gathering's character Lute. It seems clear early on that there was no real direction for Hootie to be anything more than the annoying side character who provides comedic relief for the characters that exist within him. But that annoyance quickly turns into Hootie feeling dejected by his roomies and resulted in a thirst for true companionship. That desire to feel the same unconditional love as King and Luz drove Hootie to change his behavior and genuinely try to connect with people on a deeper level, while maintaining his general lack of awareness that results in Hootie shenanigans. I love that Lilith seemed to be the polar opposite, a self-important, overly serious butthead who seems incapable of love, and Hootie, the head-empty loudmouth who is impressed by everything. There's nothing inherently special between them other than they play into each other's antics and become a dynamic duo as opposed to creating conflict over their vast differences. If it weren't for Lilith's contrast, I don't think I would appreciate Hootie quite as much. Just like Bellows and the Collector, despite being limited as far as plot impact, his presence throughout the show is consistent in the small ways, driving scenes forward, helping with transitional moments, breaking the tension where necessary, or dropping spice into an otherwise boring exposition dump. This is different from many comedic relief characters who simply disrupt the story and stall, or needlessly make an already bad scenario worse. Hootie doesn't need to be necessary to the overarching storyline when he generally aids with the script, pacing, and tone in every episode. S tier.
I miss knowing who I'm supposed to be.
Hunter. Introduced as an overpowered douche, Hunter is dethroned and exposed to be a weakling very quickly. It's super inconsistent to have a character who canonically went through hell and back within the Emperor's Coven to prove himself, then struggle with incoherent rambling, panic attacks, and generally so helpless that Plant Karlach has to save his ass. Even his status as Bellows' nephew or whatever isn't really utilized by the show at all. For somebody who was really important in the Emperor's Coven, his time there meant jack for Luz and gang. For somebody who allegedly survived a life or death challenge on a mountainside, he can barely feed himself. We have to assume that Hunter is either a liar or the writers overhyped and underdelivered, especially when the family status to Bellows was a lackluster plot point that only resulted in this blonde-haired dipshit feeling bad for himself, again and again. Like his entire character arc is self-pity and looking like a kicked puppy. I will be combing through Hunter scenes later on to see if there's anything interesting about him I might have missed, and maybe make a dedicated video saying, oh, I found something that makes him cool. Hi there, so I'm editing this, and I just added this futures note bit because I did actually go and be like, hey, I actually wrote a 3-page essay about Hunter and Gus being not exactly foils, but like very similar, because I think I realized why I disliked both of them, and I found something to like in my dislike of them. Or at very least, they are very different and accomplish something very similar. I feel it was very cool. So I'm going to make a dedicated video on it on a future date. I still find Gus being incredibly annoying, but Hunter, as you probably just watched, I was not a big fan of him. And so I actually put him in F tier. I don't know where I would put him now, but he definitely doesn't deserve to go that low. So I'm just delete all that and I guess turn on notifications so you can find out when that Hunter and Gus video comes out. Thank you. Back to the video.
She said if I don't make it back for the family reunion, I'd be banished from Palm Stings and the family home.
Kikimora. I love the cartoonish side villains who don't actually care about anything other than causing people as much pain and suffering as possible, partially because it's very religious demonic in nature to have entities that are suffering incarnate. Kikimora serving this realm in the Boiling Isles, sometimes referred to as the Demon Realm, feels like such a great home for a cliche evildoer like her. However, to add more layers, Kikimora is desperate for Belos' admiration and constantly works to overthrow Lilith, and later the Golden Guard to try and take seat as Belos' right hand, which she nearly accomplishes by the end of Season 2. She has a surprising similarity to Boscha. That is, both characters derive their self-worth by the opinions of those they feel inferior to, which is a toxic mindset to have. I think Boscha outgrew this by the end of the show when Amity refuses to be her idol, but Kikimora is much more directly responsible for the suffering of our main cast, and we also get to see her highest highs and lowest lows, from nearly getting a promotion to Belos' second in command, and also being little more than a delivery truck driver. Kikimora has more arcs than half the cast. The only element gating her from being a main character is her lack of screen time. She has several episodes where she is the main antagonist, or teaming up with the antagonist, and proving to be a severe challenge. Or we see the necessary components of her arc in extra screen time, like when she's toying with Lilith towards the end of Season 1, or plotting to assassinate the Golden Guard. She had potential to become the main antagonist, and all that evil energy wrapped up in a cute little gremlin who fits perfectly into the ecosystem of the Boiling Isles. This results in the best villain in the whole show, in my opinion, S tier.
Apparently I can't write my daring works of genius without rebelling against your gushy fantasy slop.
While King has entitled himself the King of all demons, his arc is driven primarily by very complex emotional issues involving identity, belonging, and a desire for recognition. Initially, his obscenely inflated sense of self that I found incredibly irritating was merely a mask to conceal his insecurities, knowing, but not wanting to admit, that everyone perceives him as a joke. This is why it was such an impactful moment when he learned that he truly wasn't the King of Demons, and he really felt like a laughingstock. Lots of children either grow up feeling worthless, and later on learn to value their lives through formative kinships, while other families hype up everything a child does until one day they become an adult and get hit with a reality check. King is the story of the latter, but his journey of self-discovery and working to find greatness despite the shoddy reality that could never live up to his imagination. Many shows that need to be deemed child-appropriate usually have a younger character to allow the young audience members to absorb the world through that character's eyes. While Luz and Ida are the central focus, giving lens to teens and adults, King grants perspective for the youngest in the audience, and I think he fulfills this job expertly. Even if I find the character to be repulsive personality-wise, he's a S tier.
I can do this alone. Don't follow me. And don't call me Lulu!
Lilith. During Ida's portion, I talked about how the unique adult experiences portrayed in the show that made me like Ida. Similar reasons apply to Lilith. I also discussed during Hootie's section how Lilith and him go together like peanut butter and jelly. Independent of those two, what I find most charming about Lilith's arc, independent of everything else happening in the show, is how she was able to find new meaning even after her life in the Emperor's Coven fell apart. I have friends who are getting out of decade-plus relationships, people they attempted to start a family with. It didn't work out, and now they have to rebuild an entirely new life from the ground up in their mid-30s. Watching Lilith fall apart and take refuge in the Owl House feels scarily similar to situations I've seen in situations we could all end up facing ourselves. It's also interesting to watch her embrace humility when she's stripped of her status, be put in a situation where she actually has to embrace the true meaning of family, as per the found family trope of shows like these, and learn self-acceptance with her wretched past, and learn to live with the same suffering she brought upon others. She is, by all accounts, damned, but she puts in a hell of an effort to redeem herself throughout season 2, and her type A disposition is so different from the chaos of the Owl House that it generates hilarious antics for the show and accommodates weaknesses of the other characters to help them fulfill the overarching plot of defeating Belos. Lilith's story is the high fantasy expression of what it's like to reshape oneself and move forward with purpose after one's life crumbles. S tier.
The only thing I've ever really wanted was to be understood.
Luz. I always find representation to be at its peak when it's taken passively or extremely seriously in the context of the show. The Owl House essentially starts out by threatening Luz with Ritalin camp, even though her hyperactivity isn't really the problem. It's the chaos that comes with ignoring the rules that puts her in that situation. Honestly, I did not like Luz at all on my first watch through. I thought she was profoundly out of touch, impulsive, selfish, and impatient. I saw a bunch of memes about Luz having ADHD, so I did some research into that condition and used that lens to interpret her actions on subsequent watch-throughs, and it was honestly pretty eye-opening. There's a lot of pitfalls when it comes to turning medical literature into narrative, but the driving force behind any story is conflict, and ADHD tends to create many issues for people with it. Moving away from that and to discuss the central conflict Luz begins the show with, I don't think anybody in their right mind would think it's a good idea to bring snakes to class, but Luz kind of lives in a bubble without any friends and just her supportive mom. There's not really anybody in her life to let her know it's not a great idea to bring spiders to school. She's a kid, she genuinely wouldn't know better. The initial conflict in the story is not Luz Nacida needing to figure out a way to fit in with her peers. It's about the adults responsible for Luz not wanting to teach her the difficult lessons of how to interact with people in a social setting, how to treat the space of others with respect, shared spaces. All of these issues with Luz's perception of reality go away in the Boiling Isles because Ida, Willow, and Amity all help teach Luz how to interact with people given the necessary frameworks. This extends past Luz and even helps Ida become a more functional citizen of the Boiling Isles, as she is put in a situation where she needs to become more responsible in order to help Luz thrive. A moment that threw me off the story's scent in episode 1 was, us weirdos got to stick together. It feels weirdly like a red herring to distract the audience from the lessons Luz learns in the demon realm. As much as this moniker annoyed me when I first watched the Owl House, it was interesting to see how it became less of an independence issue so much as an information issue. Ironically, this ended up becoming Luz's greatest skill. Finally, in an environment where she could make friends, was encouraged to do so, and interact with as many people as possible, Luz finally got the social help she needed to learn and adapt to collectives and learn how to operate as a functioning member of society. What she started the show deficient in quickly became the method she used to conquer the Boiling Isles and overcome the threat of the Collector. She didn't need to be a powerful witch in the way she believed, because friendship was her magic. It was Luz who figured out how the Collector ticked and was able to defuse a situation and turn an enemy into a friend. Very few shows go so deep into psychology and communication in the way that Luz does, and even less so mimicking a veil of ADHD, which is just pure insanity to me how the writers fulfilled this character so smoothly. Like, Marvel has been struggling to write convincing superheroes lately, and Luz is infinitely more complex and resonating with thousands on an incredibly deep level. She might be one of the most well-written characters to exist across media as a whole. S+ tier.
Maybe we can talk about remaking the Boiling Isles into something bigger and better.
Odalia Blight. Amity's mom highlights the negative effects of harmful parental influence, as well as taking main stage as a cunning antagonist. While Odalia's motives are less understood than those of Bellows, it was no secret that she was going to do whatever it takes to see herself at the top and was willing to kill her husband to get there. There's also a lingering arc of parents from the 50s who have no inherent self-worth as people and will base their esteem entirely off of the achievements of their kids, which is why Odalia forced Amity to be the very, very best, because Amity was an extension of herself. This portrayal captures the painful reality of toxic family dynamics where love is conditional, the worth of a child's life being tied to obedience, valuing status over a family's well-being, and treating individuality as weakness. Aside from highlighting these issues that made Amity relatable for many, Odalia was still a cunning adversary for the overarching plot, thinking multiple steps ahead, adaptable to whatever conflict that happened around her. Blending these two roles of a cruel mother and a brilliant menace created a formidable obstacles for the main characters to overcome. S tier.
Sadly, I have no choice in the matter. Effective immediately, you are no longer students of Hexide.
I really appreciate Principal Bump as a subversion to the typical oppressive authority figure archetype and regularly portrays him as caring deeply for the well-being and growth of his students. Initially, Bump fits the mold of a stern headmaster, no running in the halls, detention if you screw around, but despite his rigidness, he adapts as to the students, working to ensure the learning environment grows alongside them. This evolution frames his arc as somebody willing to throw out inherited rules in exchange for a brighter future, risking his livelihood in the process. Outside of his positive role model purpose within the show, he is not particularly interesting or deep, so I'll settle for a B tier.
The Covens against the throne, aka the Cats.
Rain Whispers, a leader willing to risk their safety, reputation, and personal happiness to resist the Emperor's oppressive regime. Despite being a bit of a theater kid, Rain's selflessness illustrates that sacrifice is more than dramatic heroism. It means making the difficult choices that no one else has the misfortune of being able to take. Even though the show ends on a positive note, Rain's goals illustrate the price of progress and how comfort needs to be sacrificed in order to make a difference. There is no kind tomorrow if you don't give up the kind of person you are today for it to exist. Rain's arc matters more than just the confines of the show. Plus, a character like this exists in most action flicks. It's not particularly notable independently, but becomes more meaningful in the context of fighting for human rights. All the other characters are inadvertently fighting for the exact same reason. Plus, Ida was also willing to sacrifice herself. I can't give Rain a bunch of points independently for heroism, but I would feel bad if I didn't mention this as their primary arc in the show. All the cutesy love stuff is tertiary and a way to blend Rain into the overarching story more seamlessly, which I think the team did a pretty good job of. I like them. B tier. Terra Snadpragan. I have a lot to say about Terra that goes in tandem with Willow because they both represent two sides of nature. One is the you gotta care and show your plants some love in order for them to bloom, and the other one, you get Terra and her don't just walk into the wilderness alone or you're gonna die vibe. A Venus flytrap perfectly portrays Terra, while a sprout or flower bud for Willow. Her magic represents the beauty of life compared to Terra's twisted vines. Every rose has its thorns. Nature's strengths become horrifying when welded with apathy. It's not particularly notable on its own because Terra is basically wrinkly Poison Ivy, but she has so much of that old lady sass who doesn't have time to put up with your attitude before she dies. She ain't deep, but I love how much personalities they gave her. C tier. Wrath. I didn't include most of the tertiary characters because they kind of appear, serve one purpose, then become relegated to cameos, but I really enjoyed Warren Wrath, so I want to explain what made him so great. He's one of those villains who, they just become bad by circumstance. Initially, he's just some cop, but turns into Ida's chaser, but he was so mad that Ida said no that he became an incel and started going out of his way to imprison people that made him feel things. This is just a dude who's probably into some freaky stuff, feeling so ashamed that he doesn't know what to do with himself, and that shame corrupts him. It's almost like there's a specific parallel that draws to something in real life, and in the first episode no less. I think this kind of villain was really good for showing how the demon realm reflects reality, but in its own unapologetically twisted way. Warden Wrath is a genuine monster who wears a mask to hide his reality. He also fits that Monster of the Week vibe in a fun way, so yeah, I'm putting him into A tier.
What? You want me to give up? You want me to admit how stressed I am? What advice could you possibly give me?
Willow. I feel like nobody talks about how much of a guiding force for good Willow is for Luz. She always approaches situations thoughtfully and with empathy, both of which Luz initially struggled with at the beginning of the show. This fits her magic type, her willingness to nurture slowly and reliably in people and plants alike. It gives her the kind of resilience needed to root everyone to reality. Just like Luz, friendship is her magic, but Willow has a stronger emphasis on her ability to help everyone around her grow. We see this with Gus, helping him overcome his panic attacks, her ability to reconnect with Amity and reform those bonds, and knowing when to set boundaries for Luz. A lot of people think compassion and care are just used to coddle the weak, but Willow shows how nurture can override nature. Even though she didn't have as much impact on the overarching storyline, she provided a lot of muscle to the team and helped a lot of the main characters in their individual development. She embodies the role of a supporting character. A tier. Make sure you're subscribed. Bye.